Hey everybody, I just wanted to make a quick little video. It's kind of time sensitive. Actually, I have to be out the door in a few minutes. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the sale of Sweetwater guitars to venture capitalists. I think it's Providence or something, because I think it goes to what I've been talking about in the last several videos I've made where I talk, which I haven't been doing quite as many. But it's been about the corporate influence in music and why I think that's so bad, and why the corporate influence in music is going to do to the music we love what it's doing to America, which is leaving empty big box stores and ruined businesses all over, and kind of it's a bubble that bursts. And I just wanted to say a little bit about that, because I've always liked Guitar Center, but there's no doubt that Bain Capital buying Guitar Center hurt that company. One of the things that I guess that one of the points I'd make is that this Providence Capital, whatever they are, they're not buying a guitar business. If they wanted to start a guitar business, they could just buy all the inventory of Sweetwater guitars, or set up in an inventory and distribution all themselves, and just start their own company. Providence Guitars, a new company for everybody to shop at. They didn't do that. What they're really buying is the name Sweetwater. And if you're a Sweetwater customer, what they're really buying is you. They didn't buy the guitars. They didn't buy the inventory. They didn't buy whatever floor room they have. I've never been there. But they bought a name. And really, when they bought that name, what they bought is you. And you are an existing customer base, and that's the asset. The asset isn't guitars. It's not music. It's not rock and roll. It's not folk music or anything else. You, the music fan and guitar player, are what they just bought. If you shop at Sweetwater, they just bought you. They didn't buy a bunch of guitars and a computer system and a floor room and some mailing setups. They bought you and anyone else who shops at Sweetwater. It's a lot easier to take something than it is to make something. We all kind of do that, but if you think about it, it's like when people, I don't know about anyone else, but we get all these calls now that people want to buy our house, because I think a lot of these houses built in the 60s and 70s are kind of attractive. They aren't so fancy and expensive, but they're kind of nice little homes. And it's a lot, it's hard to build things from scratch. And I'm not saying that's a reality. I'm not saying that's bad people that do that, but it's a lot like these funeral homes do. You ever seen a lot of a lot of funerals now are in big corporate chain funeral homes, but you hardly ever know that, because what these chains do is they go into these little towns all over America and they buy some 100-year-old funeral home that's been loved and cherished in that community, served hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people over many, many decades, and they're buying the trust and the care and they're buying history. That's what they're buying. They're buying history of a funeral home. If they wanted to just start a funeral home, all they'd have to do is, buy an inventory of caskets and embalming table. They could just buy that pretty little house on the corner where all the funerals are, and and start their new funeral home, McFunerals, But funeral mart, but they don't do that. They want the trust and the care of the community that's been built up over, in a lot of cases, well over 100 years. And they don't even, a lot of times they keep the name. A lot of times they even keep the same employers. The man that runs that funeral home might be hired back as the director of the new chain funeral home. And it's very hard to tell the difference sometimes. And there's so many examples like that. And that's what Sweetwater did. They didn't buy a guitar company. I guess if they the Providence Capital, they could probably in 15 minutes buy enough guitars, get somebody to do the website, buy a showroom if they wanted it, and start a brand new, Providence Guitars. They didn't do that. They're buying the history and the trust and the community of Sweetwater Guitars, and that is such an important point. And that's what we see all over. Like I said, there's nothing really wrong with that. But if you think about it, one problem is if they could love the guitar, the impulse would be to start your own guitar company. So what you tend to have are they're not interested in the music. They're not interested in the guitar. It's just sort of inherent in that arrangement, where they're interested in a large market. And you're the market. You might think you're a guitar player, but to them, you're a market. And they're not interested in music. And I'm not saying they're bad people, but they're not interested in music. They're not interested in the guitar. They're interested in the market, and you are the market, right? And so a lot of times their instincts are just all wrong, if nothing else, and you get all the bean counters. I think people who love music, their instincts are different. And like I said, if it was all about a love of music and the guitar, they'd probably start their own guitar company. But it's not. They're buying existing markets, because it's always a lot easier to take something than to make something. My dentist actually did that. About 20 years ago, I had a great dentist, and he was kind of a good old boy, but he had this little practice, little classic kind of Leave It to Beaver family dentistry, all, little dental office on the side of town. And, you can go in there and there'd be moms and with their kids and old people. And he was, and the last time I ever saw him, he cleaned my teeth. He told me, Dave, if you don't brush your teeth a little better, we're going to have to get you some of those ones that you soak at night. He said, I always remember that. I hope I followed his advice. I don't know. But anyway, at the end of that appointment, he said, Dave, I need to introduce you to someone. And I didn't know what he was talking about. And in came the new dentist. It was a woman. And he said, Dave, this is Dr. So-and-so. She's going to be your new dentist because I've sold the practice. So he sold this practice that was like 25 or 30 years old that he'd built from scratch, a young guy right out of dental school. And he built up this well-loved practice. People still talk about that guy today. But if you think about it, that new dentist that I switched from, I'm not saying anything about her, but I switched. But she didn't buy a dental chair and a little office and a little, a computer, and what she really bought were all his patients. She really bought the patience that he had developed in the families and the relationships that he had developed over almost 30 years, maybe 30 years. I don't know. He wasn't that young. So probably 30 years of practicing dentistry. She didn't buy like the equipment, the picks, the drills, I don't know, whatever, all those ghastly things they use on your mouth. What she bought was his patience. And she bought the trust and the love that people had for this guy. And you can never really buy that. I'm not saying they're bad people, but you can never really buy into something like that. And I think that's what rock and roll is. Rock and roll has built up this trust and this love over many decades now. Rock and roll came out in the 50s, and that's what they're buying. They're buying, and all the people that play guitar, that love guitar, that grew up with the Beatles. That's when Dylan sold his catalog for $400, was it Universal? They weren't buying Dylan songs. Some of those old Dylan songs are just him and an acoustic guitar. By the way, it's terrible that some of those songs are now they're kicking over into a new owner. Blowing in the Wind was sung at Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. It's a part of American history. But anyway, they're not buying Dylan songs, that you play on a 6-string. You could write out the chords and print them off on a piece of paper in 2 minutes. What they're buying is Dylan fans. They're buying you. If you like Bob Dylan, they just bought you. They didn't buy Dylan's music. They bought you, Dylan, the Dylan fan. And I hope they like Dylan, but if you think about it, they're going to be controlling Dylan. So many of those Dylan songs now are 60 years old or close to it, and they're part of American history. Like I always think of Blowing in the Wind. That should be a song little kids sing in school, like You Are My Sunshine, or, that's a classic song. That should not be but that's kicking over, and they're going to control it. They're buying that as an asset, and what they're really buying is the culture, the history, the mythos that goes with that great music. And most of all, if you like those songs, they just bought you. They just bought you. They didn't buy Dylan's music. They bought you, the Dylan fan. And if you like Dylan, you're going to have to go to them and put a quarter in the jukebox every time you want to hear those songs, And they're not going to be interested in having other people play them, I don't think. Even though in a lot of cases, see, this is a good example. In a lot of cases, those Dylan songs, as great as they are, they were recorded in the early 60s. They sound great, but they're of their time. Like so many that, I think this is happening to the Beatles too. They were recorded in the 60s, so the audio quality and production is of its time. I think the Beatles albums sound pretty good. They hold up, but still, it's of its time. And it becomes like a museum piece, right? They're like Gollum with this little precious ring, and they control this music, and at best it becomes this music piece that you'd put in the Smithsonian. And all the people that already love it already, if you want to hear it, that's where it's going to go. But that great music and the essential element of those songs needs to translate to new people, and that means doing them now in the now times with the now gear and the now recording technology and the now feel of 2021. And if you can't do that to music, it's going to die. And so a lot of these corporations, they don't have the instinct and they don't really have the financial incentive to let the music grow. Their financial incentives are to just, their financial incentive isn't really to let other people do this music and have it thrive and flourish for a new generation. Their financial incentive is to control every nickel of it till we all die. I don't know about you, but I'm not getting any younger. And there's a lot of death around lately. And I hope I'm not one of them, but there's a lot of death around. But their financial incentive is to control that music as tight as a drum until, and every time all the people that already like it listen to it, they have to pay. That's their financial incentive. Now an artist that's living, Muddy Waters, when he was, people used to do his songs. I talked about that in another of my videos. His financial incentive, and the Allman Brothers, all those people, Foghat, all those people did Muddy Waters songs. His financial incentive was to play my songs, please, younger people. And Muddy Waters, believe me, the last part of his life was probably a hell of a lot better than the first. I'm sure I don't know that much about his life, but the last part of his life was pretty good. I'm sure he went to some damn good parties, was around prettier women, drinking better wine, doing better whatever, playing better. And that's because his music translated into the new generation. If you had some Muddy Waters estate that was just holding on to some old recording from 1953 and wanting a nickel every time somebody played 2 bars of it, we wouldn't have ever heard of Muddy Waters today. So I worry that sometimes corporations, they don't have that sensibility, and they don't really have a financial incentive. Their financial incentives are to control the existing market, the existing catalog, and it's going to become a fossil specimen. That's their financial incentive, and then they just kind of ride out the market. And all the people that already love it, we're gonna be listening to Dylan. Maybe not as much, but we're gonna be listening to Dylan. And every time we do, they'll make some money. That's the market, right? And these people don't play guitar. If they do, they're not certainly not Dylan or Clapton or something. So their financial incentives are not music. Their financial incentives are not even fame. It's not just fortune, it's fame. If you're an artist, it's fame and fortune. It's the parties, it's all the fun and the camaraderie of playing great music all over. And they kill all that because there's nothing in that for them. What's in it for them is holding on to this existing catalog and selling it. And that's what Sweetwater Guitars is going to do. Guitar Center was so, people knock it. It was really nice because I've been shopping there for over 20 years, and they used to have like King of the Blues contests. And, I was in a couple of those and never won, but I thought I held my own pretty well but they used to have, used to have a lot more guitars in there. And I never paid much attention to the financial end of it, but was it 2006 or something when Bain bought Guitar Center? And now that I think about it, right around that time, our big Guitar Center, they never closed, but they had a big area kind of with plastic tarp closed off, and they remodeled the store, and that it was like that. You'd go in there and you could get stuff, but it was half the store was under construction, and all kinds of people were running around. working. And when they opened it back up, there were, I would say, half the guitars in there, and they had a lot more low and mid-price guitars, which, by the way, there's nothing wrong with. People need, low and mid-price guitars, but there were not as many upper-end guitars. I think their inventory was noticeably reduced, and maybe above all, their service wasn't the same. Now, there's some great people at the Guitar Center I work with, so I want to be careful. And they've sit on setups for me on my guitars. I trust them. And you know something? I never did like Sweetwater, because when you buy something with Sweetwater, they set it up for you in Indiana and send it to you, and then you get it, And Guitar Center, people cut it down, but there you can always walk into, almost anywhere you go, there's a Guitar Center, probably, unless you live out in the sticks, there's probably a Guitar Center within an hour or so of you, and you can get in there and talk to a human being. Believe me, with the phone and the computers and click this box and push this button, it's nice to talk to a human being. But anyway, I just wanted to make that point. Sweetwater didn't just buy a guitar company. They could do that in 10 minutes with their money. They could just buy a buku buttload of Strats, Les Pauls at wholesale prices, get a website set up, maybe a warehouse, go to town. They didn't do that because it might not work. What they bought is the name Sweetwater, and the name Sweetwater is really you. It's you. And that's what all these companies do. They're like the funeral homes that buy out the history of a funeral home. They're like that dentist I talked about. She bought a 30-year practice. She didn't really buy its chair and his instrument. She bought me, and she bought everyone else that used to go to that dentist. That's what she bought. And that's what Sweetwater just bought. Not saying there's anything really wrong with that. I guess that's the free market. Sort of. If you look at some of the ways the laws are set up, though, I don't know, in some of these areas, it's you can call it free market. I guess if you could make a case that there are some things about it that aren't a free market. But anyway, that's for other people to discuss. But just remember that what they really bought is you. When Dylan sold his catalog to Universal, Universal didn't buy Dylan's music because that's probably not worth that much to them. If you think about the music per se, what they bought was you, the Dylan fan. And if you like Dylan and you want to listen to that music, you're going to be paying, which is fine. But they're not. Their financial incentive isn't to get that music out there. There's a big Dylan fan base. That's why it's worth $400 million to them. And all of us who love Dylan, that we're going to be their market. They don't really have an incentive financially to do anything else other than market the existing Dylan catalog and all those old Dylan recordings. And if they do let other people do it, it'll be really careful and very expensive, by the way. If you want to sing a Dylan song now, and you're like a artist or a country artist or something, there'll be a lot of lawyers involved and a lot of money. And they might say, oh, we're taking care of Dylan's legacy, but music is like seeds. It goes into the people, it goes into the culture, and then you have some, it's like Christ's parable, some doesn't grow, but you might have that mighty oak come up, the Beatles, the Stones, Hendrix, but it's like music's like seeds, it go and when you cut off that process, you just sort of inherently limit it. So, but I thought it was kind of too bad Sweetwater sold out, really, to be honest with you. I always preferred Guitar Center for the reasons I said, but nonetheless, I think it was a family-owned business run by people that loved the guitar, and you're never going to replace that, everybody. You'll never will. A corporation that anytime they're buying you, the customer, and not guitars, you can never replace the people that founded out of a love and wanting to serve people through music and helping people play music. Well, God bless you. I just wanted to share those thoughts. I've got to leave. Bye. Sonny and Cher.